All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Thad Hwang. Thad, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
I am thrilled to be on the show, Kevin.
Well, I'll tell you, I am really looking forward to this. And I want to start off by giving a shout out to your PR guy, Matt Monty, because Matt, he reached out to me. I found out about the Quoted platform, I don't know, maybe like a year and a half ago. A good friend of mine told me about it. And I'll tell you, I have met some amazing podcast hosts or podcast guests because of that platform. And your PR guy Matt reached out to me, and I'll tell you what, Thad, he is really good at talking you up, man. He sent me a message and was telling me, "Hey, Cavi, I want to tell you about Thad, and here's why I think he'd be such a great fit for the $1 Million Relationships podcast. And let me know if you'd be interested in talking with him." And I'm like, after I read what he shared, I'm like, "Heck yeah, I'd want to talk with Thad." And so you and I already got to have that conversation, and that's what I love about this is like now doing the podcast, you and I get to reconnect rather than connecting for the first time, you know.
Right, right.
And
And that's fabulous. And
yeah,
yeah, I'm glad he reached out and we're connected.
yes, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, I'll just start off really simple. Just start a simple question to start with. What do you do, Thad, and who do you guys serve?
Yeah, so I'm currently the CEO and founder of Goji Mobile.
Okay,
And Goji, I'll start with talking about what Goji is, really.
sure.
And the easiest way to explain it is we're the Expedia of cell phones and plans. And we really want to serve users in helping them shop for cell phones and plans, just like you might shop for flights and travel. It should be just as easy as that. It's interesting how this sort of all came about because this aha moment of when I was helping a friend and we were spending hours digging through plans and the hidden fees and coverage maps and all the promo, and we still weren't even sure we had the right choice. And
Mhm.
then it clicked. It's like, why is this so hard?
Yeah.
Why is it so hard to shop for plans and even phones? It shouldn't be harder than booking a vacation, right? And so this is where this analogy of being like the Expedia, because that should trigger for most people, like, oh yeah, right? Like when you go to
Yeah.
Expedia or Kayak and you're
Yeah.
searching for flights and hotels, it's easy. You're seeing it all there. You see all the flight deals, the hotel deals. Very similarly, we want to be that for cell phones and plans. That's really what Goji Mobile is about. And we started our journey 3 years ago and really taken off since then. And so excited to kind of share our progress with you in the audience.
Yeah. So how did you get how did you even get here, Thad? Because and granted, you and I have already talked, so I have the benefit. I have some insight that our listeners don't yet have. But what I do know is you got a really impressive background. And so
Thank you.
and so
Well,
share some of that with us too.
yeah,
And some of the
what's a long one? I mean, I think that's what probably helps. I've been doing this for a really, really, really long time, over 25 years. I got my start, really, I mean, as a software engineer to
okay.
start. I worked at Oracle and, but then realized, you know what, I really wanted to sort of cut my teeth into more of the product side of things. And so joined a company called Trilogy in Austin, Texas in the late 90s, early 2000s. That was really sort of my exposure into the enterprise side of things, right? But my heart and my head have always been around consumer. So in the mid sort of 2000s, decided to make my way over Silicon Valley and joined eBay. And
Okay.
single-handedly, that experience at eBay really, it was almost like, product management 101, like almost like university, because I learned so much in my time there from just building up the vocation and the discipline. But spent my time at eBay and then continued my path through the consumer side of things. One of the more exciting journey elements was joining Lyft when Lyft was in that sort of hyper growth stage. I'm sure folks remember the time when there was a hashtag delete Uber. Well, when I joined, I was given the reins to lead our rider or passenger experience team. And boy, did we see a massive crush of demand go from Uber to Lyft, and that I tell you that was an experience, but that was a fun one, and got to really experience the highs there of seeing Lyft really take off and leading that charge. And then, yeah, and just surrounding those two big company experiences with a lot of times with startups. So I think what's really unique about my background is that I really sort of strafed all different phases of companies from just early stage of like you're the first one on the ground, screwing in IKEA desks and getting those all ready for the new subsequent employees to the hyper growth lift to then massive 10,000 plus person employee company at like eBay. So I think that's really what's I think pretty unique about my background and in the 25 years I've been in tech.
Yeah. Yeah. You shared this really awesome story of when we spoke before, when you were at Lyft and how you got some real insight to
Hmm.
some of the problems that the Lyft drivers were really facing
Yep.
with. I mean, because and what came out of that for me when you shared that story was like, wow, here's a guy who really understands the value and the importance of talking with your clients and stuff
Yeah.
and your users. And so
Hmm.
share that story because it was like so doggone powerful.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite stories, and I'll even take a step back because it started actually at eBay. At eBay, they also had the same sort of concept of like, and I like to use this term dog fooding your product, but
Hmm.
when you're at eBay, it's easy to buy things on eBay, but a little bit more of a challenge to sell, right? And so, given it's a dual-sided marketplace, so eBay always wanted to encourage its employees to also be sellers, to really go through the experience of what it's like to try to list something and go through the whole experience of like, hey, how do I sell, list it, and then transact with the buyer, right? And so from that, I took that to Lyft, and this is a great story. So, as I mentioned, I was leading the passenger experience team, and very similar to eBay, Lyft is a dual-sided marketplace. You've got your drivers and you've got your riders, and me leading the passenger experience team it only gives you one sort of lens into this experience, right? Because there's a driver involved in this as well too. Because as a passenger, you might think like, oh gosh, like the rider or the driver canceled on me. Like I'm sure you've had this happen where you book a ride and the driver, but that doesn't tell the full story of what may have happened behind the scenes of why the driver may have canceled, right? And so from that experience, I said, hey, look, okay, so guys, I took my team and said, let's pick a market that we think could give us a really good exposure of being drivers ourselves. And we chose Los Angeles because it's a sprawling metropolitan. So I said, hey, look, let's take my team. I think I had around 15 folks, and that included engineers too, because I wanted
Okay.
engineers to, because like a lot of times, right, engineers, you think of, hey, I'm gonna take the code, the requirements. No, you also want to have the engineers develop that empathy as well too, right? Because they could be also because great ideas can come from any part of the organization, right? So we pulled everyone who's involved with the passenger experience team. We all flew down to LA for and met at the driver hub, and then we became drivers ourselves. And so I got to firsthand experience this and said, "Hey, okay, let's be drivers." And so when I got in my car, I headed over to LAX, got in the queue and waited 40 minutes for my first ride. So excited. I was like, yes, I'm ready to take this passenger. I pull up and I pick them up and they want to go to the In and Out. And when you've been to LA and obviously In and Out, people want to go to In and Out. There's an In and Out that's maybe 5 minutes away from LAX. And I'm sure people are familiar with this, but happy to take the passenger there, but boy, I just waited 40 minutes in line to take a 5 minute fare to right to
Yeah.
for pass. And then guess what? I had to go back in line
Hmm.
and wait another 40 minutes. And I'm sitting, I'm like, whoa, this is not fair. And this is actually, and this probably helps explain things, as I mentioned earlier, because drivers would oftentimes cancel short, we call them short rides, because they would see the ride and they're like, wait a minute, I just waited 40 minutes.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm going to cancel on this passenger because I don't want to take a 5 minute
Yeah.
ride, right? Because it's not worth my time. And
Yeah.
guess what? The passengers are like, wait. this driver just canceled on me, or like, oh wait, these drivers keep canceling. This is a bad experience.
Yeah.
And so from that direct experience, and obviously the whole team had their own set of experiences we shared, but we got back to the hub and we started talking about this, and we just thought this is not right. And so from that direct experience, we said, you know what? And the engineers, they heard this story, we were talking about it. They coded this up, I swear, like that day. And we put this feature and we said, look, this is the new feature. If you as a driver accept a short ride, you get to immediately go back to the front of the queue at LAX. And I tell you, we got that out so quickly, and my this is my favorite part because whenever you get feedback from users that reinforce what you did was the right thing,
Yeah.
that's the best feeling. And so
Yeah.
then, immediately in the driver forums, people were like, "Hey, have you guys seen this feature? It is the best feature." And then there's obviously a famous saying like, copying is the greatest form of flattery. Well, guess who copied that feature? Uber copied that feature
Yeah.
maybe a week or months later. That was just ultimate flattery. But I love telling that story because there's no way that you could tell, like experience that through just data, right? Because when you think about tech, people have their dashboards with their morning coffee, they go to their analytics platform, they may ask some questions, but there's no way to be able to derive those insights from that quantitative data versus the qualitative aspects of actually when you dog fooded your product, you actually became the driver and actually like experienced the platform. We would have never come to that insight with it unless we did it. So
Yeah.
I love telling that story. I've used it everywhere I go because right, that is the way to be able to make sure you empathize with your
Yeah.
users
Yeah.
to build a better product and experience.
You bet. Yeah, I mean, that is such an awesome story that just really paints a picture of what that can look like, that not just the frustration and how you discovered it, but what comes when you like figure out a solution for that,
Mhm.
and how now everybody's just like everybody's way happier now, and it just solves a big problem, you know.
Yeah, and it was a group effort. Like we because that's this is always people talk about this, but you need to find what the problem is first,
Yeah,
right? And once you identify the problem, you and the team can then rally around what the possible solutions could be, right? Versus right, instead of being that hammer searching for a nail, we actually had the problem that we could all rally around to go brainstorm and figure out what the best way to figure that out. There's another famous Silicon Valley story where our CEO once put like the customer support, like a red telephone. I don't know if you heard this, Kevin,
I
but
don't think
like
so.
there's a CEO who once put because they were getting so many like customer support requests because
Okay.
things were broken. He once put I think it was like a red customer support this could be like urban legend, but he put like a telephone right in the middle, the customer support telephone right in the middle of the engineering room. And the engineers had to answer the phone just to experience and feel what the customer support teams were experiencing from
Yeah.
all whether the bugs or the other things that were happening. And guess what happened? Like immediately once the engineers like felt this,
Yeah.
they started making sure that the quality of their code was much better, right?
Yeah.
So like again,
Wow.
lots of
Wow.
examples I'm sure out there and people can share about like, hey, the value of like dog fooding your product.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like, what you mentioned with Goji, you're right. It is like when it comes to phones and phone plans and all of that, it's like, man, it's just like, I mean, it makes you want to pull your hair out because like, how do you make sense of it all? And so with now you guys are 3 years into this, what has been, what inspires you most about what you guys are doing at Goji and what's been taking place over the last 3 years and stuff?
Yeah, I mean the what inspires us is when we hear because this is it sounds obvious, but people love saving money, right? That's really the bottom line. And we had some hypotheses coming in like, hey, people want to find better coverage and so forth, but it really boils down to saving money. And so when we get testimonials and write-ins about it, thank you for helping me like quickly find something like a new plan or a new phone that helped me save money. I mean, that's great. And that's really what we're here to do is
Yeah.
right? We're this sort of like agnostic marketplace, just like Expedia and Kayak are doing with flights and hotels, right? But we want to just put it all out there so it makes it just such a seamless and easy experience
Mhm.
to really sort of cut through all the noise and the complexity that's out there because it's just not easy. And so when we get testimonials come in like that, it's great. We celebrate those moments.
You bet. You bet. So, from your current vantage point, 3 years into this, what's your vision for this going forward, Thad?
Yeah, I mean, we want to continue to sort of be the sort of go-to marketplace, right? Like I think just as like the Expedia and Kayak are synonymous with like flight and travel planning, we want to be that. I don't know if we've achieved that yet from a brand perspective, but we hope to get there
Okay.
soon. And then, ultimately, it would be, really nice to be able to sort of provide an offering ourselves. Like what if we became an MVNO ourselves. MVNO stands for a mobile virtual network operator, kind of like a Mint Mobile,
Okay.
Visible
Okay.
like Verizon, where they sort of lease bandwidth off of the MNO
Uh-huh.
main carriers like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. But, our vision ultimately is to just sort of be that super app for telecom because in the consumer space there really isn't there. I think there's a good examples out there internationally, but in the US, I think we want to be that super app where we can do all things that people need that can service beyond just cell phones and plans, whether it be speed tests or whether it be coverage map, all those things inclusively, we want to be that sort of central like place that people can think about and say, yep, oh yeah, I have something mobile related, I gotta go Goji, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Very good. Well, okay, so now that we've got a little bit of context set here, and people know a little bit about who you are, Thad, and what you're all about and what you guys are doing, I want to switch gears just a little bit and I
Mhm.
want to start talking about the relationship side of this.
Mhm.
So, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And Thad, I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Yeah, Uh, this might be a very obvious answer, but this is the first one that came to my mind, and this is my wife, Viet. And I'll tell you, there's twofolds, and obviously, and you're a family man yourself. I see your lovely family there. Obviously, when you marry someone, it changes your life from that point on, right? Because then you start a family ideally, and you have kids, and that's obviously a big change as well too. But why I bring up my wife in particular is because, and obviously you as a parent, and because there's so many similarities between running a household and running a company. I'm sure people can understand that, but the parallels that I can draw between just the parenting side of things to actually like management it's crazy. Like I'm sure people have written books about this, but it's crazy how much I've learned from my wife that I've actually then applied back to the corporate world myself because they're again the same thing. It's like you've got this household, right? Where of however many kids you got. But a company, very similarly, you're managing employees, you're managing kids, your kids. But how you do that, also, there's striking similarities. So here's a good example. My wife, early on in our relationship, we encouraged us to read The Five Love Languages. Have you heard of that
Oh,
book?
yes,
Oh yeah.
yes.
So people who nod and know this book, it should be a core part of every
Yeah,
relationship, right? Because it's important to understand what your partner's primary love language is. It's
yeah,
important
yeah,
because and as for those who've read the book, because if you're not feeding that love tank, then equally if you do the opposite, you're detracting from that, right?
yeah.
It's really putting them in a bad. So similarly, understanding what your kids also love languages are equally important,
Mhm.
but there's a corporate element as well to this as well too, right? Because A lot of times, and this is one of my favorite things as a manager, I like to do as a people manager. Because the common mistake that managers make, especially early managers, is that you kind of assume that everyone's motivated by the same thing,
Yeah.
like money or promotions. Yes, sure, but we like to sort of call those like short-term motivators.
Mhm.
But like for example, let's say someone you manage comes to you, you're like, I'm unhappy, I'm unmotivated. Oh, okay. Well, let's give you a spot bonus, or let's promote you. Well, guess what? 6 months later, they quit or they're still unhappy. Well, th because we didn't get to identify what their long-term motivational factor was. What are they really truly intrinsically motivated by?
Yeah.
Uh, Maybe it was because they really value autonomy and they just weren't getting it. Yeah, you can give them a raise or spot bonus, but that didn't really solve the
Sure.
core component of like they need autonomy, right? So I'm giving this example because again, that's a parallel of like, so my wife introduced me to this great book, Love Languages. We constantly refer to it. We try to understand our kids' love languages. Well, corporate managers should also understand, if you want to retain and grow your talent, you also need to get to the core of understanding what motivates them, what's their long-term motivational factors, right? Instead of just, let's throw money and promote them all the time, right? Yeah. And I can keep going on and on around like, hey, how about, you know, leading with patience and not controlling, right? Like letting, for example, we really tried, and I'm really bad. This is why my wife's great at this. Like let's say my son's having trouble with his shoe. The default thing that a parent does just goes down and then ties their shoe, and my
Yeah.
wife will pull me back and say, "Hey, let him struggle.
Mhm.
Let him struggle to learn how to." But same thing in the corporate world, right? If you try to micromanage and control people, like the most important thing of a growth in corporate world is letting people make the mistakes.
Yeah.
Let them grow, right? It's a long-term journey, not a short. Let's let them grow and figure it out, and then yes, they're just going to be better in the long term. So again, so much here that I've learned from my wife yet that then it's like, aha, I can I can take this into the corporate world, and
Uh-huh.
voila, it
Uh-huh.
works. It works. It's great. So yeah, that was when you asked that question, that was the first one because obviously, it changed from a personal perspective, but that directly sort of also helped sort of change how I think about building companies, building relationships, building up my employees,
Yeah.
building the people
Yeah.
I manage. Like I think there's just so many parallels there that I learned so much from my wife that I can bring to the corporate world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because my wife turned me onto that book years ago too. And my wife's love language is words of affirmation. She loves
That's mine. That's
being
mine.
really
Yeah,
okay, okay. And when I learned that about her, it's like, well, gosh, I can do that. And
hmm
and and if that's going to help her feel more seen, more heard, more appreciated, more loved, then heck, I'm going to be sure and let her know how much I appreciate her for doing everything that she does.
exactly, exactly.
And
And
so
and there's sorry, keep going.
no, that's it right there. I mean, because that's their love language. They want to hear that stuff. And now we know that. Well, why wouldn't we want? I mean, because you know what, we've been together. Well, July or August will be 21 years we've been married.
Congratulations.
And so, I really appreciate Lisa and I couldn't imagine doing what I do without her in my life. And like, and there's other people, I guarantee you there are people in your company that is their language, their words of
Exactly.
affirmation is their thing too.
Exactly.
And
And it's just if once and the most important thing once you identify that as a manager, right, then you can even the smallest little like kudos
yeah,
in a Slack channel
yeah,
or an email or just at a team meeting
yeah,
really, right, sort of helps fill that sort of corporate, motivational love tank, if you will,
yes,
right? Like that's
yeah,
so important. But again, the opposite applies, right? When you maybe inadvertently put them down in a Slack chat or say like right, that's going to really detract, right? So,
Yeah.
because when I had larger teams, I actually had a spreadsheet, and there's actually a lot of people ops type companies that do this. They'll you fill it's kind of like Myers-Briggs, where
Okay.
you fill out a survey and it builds a heat map.
Uh-huh.
And what it does is then it helps identify what their motivational factors are. And then from
Okay.
that exercise, then what I do is I take that and I create a spreadsheet with all the different names of folks and what their motivational factors are. Because then as a manager, I can, it's not perfect and I'm not always going to be on top of it that way, but at least, one, I'll tell you right now, people the employees appreciate this because they feel like, wait, okay, you want to know more about me, you
Yeah.
want to understand me more. And then yeah, and then constantly just looking at that and making sure, yep, like Charlie, he loves autonomy. Let's make sure we give him that. Hey, Beth really loves, right, like words of affirmation, or so there's all these different like sort of like factors that go in that's so important. I actually think at eBay we did this. I learned this actually as well too, but it's called motivational factors. So if people are curious, they could just like search for it and try to
Hmm.
find it.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, so what is an example of a situation where you personally, Thad, got to make a really substantial impact because you learned about this through your wife and stuff. And maybe even it surprised you in the moment, but you also know that that would have never been possible if not for the relationship that you and your wife had and being able to piece all this stuff together. What's an example of something like that where you were empowered that way?
Let me try to think. Uh, an example that she gave, I might, um, so this is interesting. So, there was a time at eBay, and this is actually my wife had we had talked about this as well too, because, um, a lot of times, you in the process of hiring, right? Because this
Okay.
hiring is a sort of inexact science, right? And this is actually before we had kids, but when she and I were talking, this before, and I had just opened up a requisition on my team at eBay. Um, we were talking about like, okay, you've got your resume and all the figures and numbers and what they've done, right? And then that sometimes, she she's a big sort of intuition, right, person. Sometimes the intuition sort of has to sort of guide because at the end of the day, like coming from an engineering background, it's I can be very robotic. It's like formulaic in sometimes, right? And so it was interesting for this one requisition at eBay. It came down to two candidates, and we had one candidate who just was perfect on paper. It was computer science major. Um, it's all this stuff that just fits so perfectly, right?
Mhm.
But then this other woman who applied wasn't technical, um, but boy, was she sharp as a tack. I mean, it just, and as we went through it, and I had my entire team interview both, obviously, and guess, it's not a surprise. Everyone was like, "Oh, we got to go with the guy because it's right, just the
Mhm.
resumes."
Mhm.
And I overruled them because I was the hiring manager, but I overruled them and say, "Hey guys, you know what? Um, I think we need to go with the other candidate because I think there's intangibles here, right? That you can't really peel away from just a resume, but there's intangibles here that I gleaned from the interview because um, any hiring manager knows it's rare to like fire or let go of some person that doesn't work out because of their skills. It's usually the behavioral stuff that really like, and for me, she just nailed a lot of the behavioral stuff around like, do I think she's going to work hard? Do I think she's going to really like ask the next level of question down? Is she going to care about the business, right? And um, it's funny because, obviously we hired her and she accepted the offer. And less than like 3 months in, everyone on the team came to me like, you made the right decision, right? Because culturally, she was the perfect fit, but boy, did she just hustle and work her butt off. But this was an example of just like, just using that intuition and a little experience to just say, look, I think this is the right call for us to just kind of go upstream against sort of the norm and hire the person. And she ended up being an amazing hire, but to that end, I'm so proud that she's just really carved out an amazing career herself, in
Yeah.
tech.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. And you know what, you're right. Cause like, we can teach the stuff, we can teach the skills, but the other stuff, that's more challenging. Like, how they show up and how they just, the whole mindset stuff,
Yeah.
that, I'm like, if they got that, man, it's really easy to teach somebody skills and stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
and, yeah.
It's funny because my son's on a like a baseball, a AAA baseball league, and the coach says this. The coach, I'm an assistant, but the head coach is like, look, because my son's pretty fast. He's like, look, I can't teach speed, but I can teach everything else,
Yeah.
right? Right. So those innate qualities that come with, someone
Yeah.
that's the things you want to anchor on, right? Like to your point, Kevin, like how do we, we can teach those things, the skills, right? But if you hire somebody that hey, is already comes unmotivated, doesn't want to learn about the space, right?
Mm.
Or just maybe isn't good at compromising and maybe comes abrasive, right? All of a sudden they become this sort of uh, can cancer on the team, right? Like immediate, like those are the hires you're going to regret, right? It's always the behavioral stuff you want to anchor on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for anybody that might be listening to this and thinking to themselves, man, Kevin, I really love Thad. I love who he is. I love how he shows up. And maybe it meant they'd like to find out more about what you guys are doing at Goji and stuff. Any websites, any resources we can share with folks?
Absolutely. So, if you're interested in the product itself, it's gogmobile.com. You can
Okay.
go there. We also have a social footprint. You can follow us on LinkedIn and we're also on Instagram and Meta. I believe our handles are Goji Mobile as well, so it's pretty
Okay.
straightforward. But yeah, and then I'm on LinkedIn as well, so anyone can reach out and follow me and contact me as well. I'd love to connect with more folks that way as well. This is, obviously a great forum to be able to connect with more leaders and other folks in the industry. So yeah, happy I'm here to connect with more people.
Absolutely. Is there any last thing that you feel led to share, Thad, before we call it a wrap?
Yeah, no, not particularly. I mean, I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be on the show, Kevin.
You
Honestly,
bet.
I think being able to sort of share my personal experiences, my sort of career background, but also just talking a little about Goji as well too, and having that forum. So I really appreciate the time.
You bet. You bet. I'll tell you, this has been an absolutely amazing experience, Thad. I've really appreciated getting to know you a little bit, and just really appreciate you just showing up and being you. This has been a great experience, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you, and I'm excited to get this out there and share it with folks. So thanks so much, man.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited to listen in. This is going to be great. Happy to share with everyone I know, but thank you so much. I really appreciate the time again.
You bet.